Okay, so I will switch to English now and go through a little bit, just a brief overview about the evolution of the human central nervous system. And the overall goal of today's talk will be to briefly get you through the development of the earliest neural systems that have been found in evolution for around 600 million years ago until the development of the human brain that we have today. And some of the first evidence of early central nervous systems have been found to have evolved around 600 million years ago in small jellyfish-like species. Some of them, some researchers even claim that sponges are able to have nervous systems. But the idea is that you have a system that is able to respond in some structured way to an external stimulus. So it's a stimulus response-driven system where you, for instance, apply some outside force on the creature, or you apply a gradient of certain you can have some type of chemical gradients that will influence the system, and then it will respond in certain ways on that. And one part of the central nervous system is, of course, that you have a nerve cell which is able to respond to external stimuli. But another thing is that you also have to have chemical reactions inside that nerve cell. So that's transport of gradients across the sensory membrane, or the cell membrane. And another critical part in the evolution of nervous systems is also the evolution of synapses. So that is the ability for cells to communicate between each other. So you have a synapse, which is, of course, something you probably all know, is a connection between two cells where there is a chemical synapse, or chemical communication between the two nervous cells. And there is evidence that there might be some components of synapses evolving already more than 1 billion years ago, although it's of course controversial whether it's coming before actually the development of the actual neural systems. But the idea is that there is at least some type of cell communication developing, and that has then, from fish and later on developed into vertebrates, and you then have also mammals evolving somewhere around 200 million years ago. Since this is a course in human neurobiology, we will mainly speak about mammals and their evolution later on into primates and later on into humans. And what distinguishes mammals from other animals is that they have 6 cortical layers. So if you look at the cortex, so that's the outer brain, large brain part of the animals, they have 6 cortical layers where the primary input comes from what's called layer 4, from a structure in the brain called the thalamus. And in comparison, reptiles, they only have 1 cortical layer, whereas the mammals, they have up to they have 6 cortical layers. And from each of these cortical layers, there are branches to other layers and projections to other parts of the central nervous system. Some of the earliest mammals, they have been estimated to possess somewhere around 15 to 25 cortical areas. So some of them are responsible for visual processing, others for audition, some for primary sensory processing of stimuli from the external world, and also for olfaction. If we look at the type of mammals which have evolved, then at some point going from fish to amphibians and then later from amphibians into mammals. That evolution took place somewhere around 200 million years ago, where the first mammals appeared somewhere around 180 million years ago. And some of them can still be found, or at least reminiscence of these animals can be found today as what's called marsupials. Then later on we have kangaroo-like animals evolving, and then some now extant species that no longer exist. And then somewhere around 85 million years ago, there's at least evidence, or at least if you look at how the genetics, if you calculate back in animals, if you calculate back and think when would that type of genetic variation have occurred, then it's suggested that primates, the first primates evolved somewhere around 85 million years ago. If you look at what's actually found of fossil evidence, so that's actual animals been found, you'll see that you have evidence from somewhere around 55, 60 million years ago that primates evolved. Then later on we have the lemurs evolving somewhere around 70 million years ago, and later on we have then what's called the old world monkeys. So those are the ones that you see down here. So those are the monkeys that you will find in Africa and in Asia. And then somewhere around 33 million years ago you will have what's called New World monkeys. So those are the monkeys that you will find in the American subcontinent. So, and there is a distinction between those two types of primates, so the old and the New World monkeys. Then later on, there somewhere around 8 million years ago or 7 million years ago, you will have some of the earliest common ancestors of what we have today as humans, and on the other side, chimpanzees. So somewhere around 8 million years ago, this branching of the evolutionary tree took place. And if we then look at the fossil evidence of human-like species, some of the oldest ones have been found around 7 million years ago. So, and later on, around 6 to 5.5 million years ago, you have some of the first human-like species called Ardipithecus, which have been found in Africa. And later on, these have then evolved into Australopithecus, which have different sub-branches. So these are found to be around 4 million years old, some of the first evidence. And these have then later on evolved into different subspecies depending on how their body looked like. You will be able to differentiate them into different subcategories. Later on, these evolved into some of the first species of Homo. That's Homo habilis and Homo rudolfensis, which are first found somewhere around 2.5 million years ago. And later on, these evolved into Homo ergaster and Homo erectus. So these have actually been some of the first who have gone out of Africa and also spread into Asia and Europe. And there's evidence of these being found, at least in large parts of Asia. Later on, these have evolved into Homo heidelbergensis and also into Neanderthal people. And now we are up somewhere around here, so somewhere around 500,000 years ago. And later on, around 180,000 years ago, some of the first evidence of what seems to be modern humans or Homo sapiens have been found also in Africa, and these have then later, somewhere around 70,000 years ago, spread into to Asia and later to Europe. So here we can see how the different species have which periods of the last 7 million years that these species have been on Earth. And of course, these depend on how much fossil evidence that you can actually find. So you don't really know if you just have found a single skull or a single bone from these species, whether it's only from that time period. So you need, of course, to have large samples in order to determine how large time span that these different subspecies of the Homo species have lived. Recently, there has also been found people or Homo subspecies which has been relatively unknown until very recently, and I will come back to that a bit later. But at least those have shown some quite interesting features which suggest that there has at least been a lot of different subspecies living on the Earth together with each other. So it's not just one single species of humans that has been there at one time, but several different species. And this, of course, have implications on how the evolution of these species has gone by.